Yeah, Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, so let's do this. So let's start with a brief history of mining. Most of you will probably know that when Bitcoin was invented, you actually could mine Bitcoin from a personal computer. And then things evolved, and some creative people found out on forums, that you could use GPUs to use that, that additional processing power and mine more Bitcoin. And so this is the beginning of a competition for Bitcoin, which eventually turned into FPGAs and today to the ASICs. The ASICs led to some phenomenon that we know like ASIC centralization. So we see a lot of hash rate that is concentrating into the hands of a few companies. For some moments, we saw also it to concentrate into some geographical areas. Fortunately, with China, that had, unfortunately for them and for for freedom, but fortunately for miners and for Bitcoin, there was actually a ban that made a lot of hash rate move around in the world. So today we see a big geographic distribution, but we still see a big concentration in a few business ends. And so one way to change that is to bring more mining to home miners. So people such as us, pleb miners that just want to have one or two machines running. But what we often see, at least in the mainstream media, is that you won't be profitable to run just one or two machines. And it's actually right if it's not done the proper way. But today we'll demonstrate that there are some ways to be creative and to actually generate some very interesting revenue. So let's go to the next slide. So the benefits for home mining that we see is, for instance, obviously you can earn income with your mining. I don't think you learned nothing about that, but it also allows you to have a greater independence and a greater flexibility, controllability about your UTXOs, which is essentially, for those who don't know, your Bitcoins. So you have more control over where they are generated, where they are sourced, and so obviously it can lead to more privacy about your coins and your stash. The cost savings on eating, so as we just are demonstrating right now, you can actually turn something very old and that most people will find useless today into a very useful home eater. And we'll see a bit more about the economics of doing that transformation, if it makes sense or no for people here, but also even around the world. Bitcoin mining, so home mining also contributes to more decentralization. So as we touched on, it's presently still in the hands of a few companies, and we know there are some regulatory also pressure on some of those institutional miners. There are some countries that are facing all kinds of regulatory changes, and so obviously, and even here in Quebec, we have the moratorium. For those who don't know, it's essentially a cap on new Bitcoin mining projects. And this cap prevents companies like ours, or even institutional companies like Bitfarms, Argo, Sato, Hive, which are all companies that are based here in Quebec, by the way. It prevents them to make any expansions here in Quebec. So one thing I find very interesting about that is there's a cap of 50 kilowatt that Hydro-Quebec will allow for anyone to do mining. And so obviously for a home use, or even for a small business, medium business use, it makes sense to use under 50 kilowatts. And if you use it to turn your hashes into heat, turn waste into value, and well, then it's going to be much more profitable, and we'll see a bit more about that. As I was saying, because of the control over your UTXOs, it allows for more privacy over your coins. So the ASIC miners, so the way we repurpose them into ethers, there's a lot of ways. So for instance, right now immersion cooling has been gaining a lot of traction. The advancements from immersion cooling is also allowing for a lot of heat transfer opportunities. So for instance, I was speaking to one of our students last week, and he was saying that he would heat his roof. He would send some tubes filled with the liquid that's used for the immersion, and send it into his roof to essentially heat the roof and have no snow on his roof. So there's a lot of ways to be creative about that and repurpose our miners. For the sake of this example and the economics we'll be looking into for this presentation, we'll look at this box here. So it's essentially a box we 3D printed. You use PETG filament, and you insert your old Antminer S line into it. you essentially, and let's see it here, you essentially remove the stock fans because, as many of you probably know, it's very loud. Then you can obviously, by the way, it's an open source project. So the case you can actually download and print from yourself with your own printer. This is a design that's being made by CryptykHex, sorry. And so we encourage you to visit their website. They're very nice. They do a lot of open source projects. We are sponsoring the next open source case they are doing, which is the Antminer T17 and S17 case for the same purpose, for home heating. And again, we'll see a bit more about the economics about that. Ideally, when you do one of those projects, you'll want to use custom firmware. So for instance, BrainsOS, Vnish, anything like that that will allow you to play with the frequency, reduce obviously the load on the machine a bit, because your breakers won't like it if it's pulling the full 1600 watts. So what we do is we set it to about 800 watts. We have two noctua fans that are turning under 2000 RPM. And with the box, it essentially gives you that quiet heater right there. If you want, you can also add the Wi-Fi dongle. So for instance, right now, and we just had a lot of issues with this one, you can connect your miner Wi-Fi. Normally, since it's industrial setups, you have RG45, Ethernet cables that will take care of that. But for home setups, you want to have more flexibility. So Wi-Fi is nice for that. And then you just find a nice spot that needs heat. So you have a nice garage. You want to keep your car hot in the winter, place a heater there. I also want to touch on a bit on open source and hardware. And as many of you know, Bitmain has been dominating the ASIC hardware manufacturing. There are starting to be a lot more competition now. We know, for instance, MicroBT has gained a lot of traction in the recent years, and there's lately the Intel chips, which I know for a fact there are designs coming from this one, from different mining companies. And so it's very interesting because we're seeing the miners themselves, the hashers themselves, start to get involved into the design process. And we see companies like Intel starting to provide miners with the semiconductors they need to mine Bitcoin. So we can see there's definitely some serious companies getting involved into Bitcoin, such as Intel. I don't think they have any time to waste with kids projects. So we can I think we can say that Bitcoin is maturing with that kind of stuff. Any case, we also have to look into open sourcing, and that is not something we have a lot of in Bitcoin mining and ASICs designing, actually. So one thing we've brought, and you can also go at the table and have a look, we've brought some ASIC chips, and we've brought Bitaxe. And the Bitaxe is essentially a PCB. It's just an open source project. You can go and download the schematics from GitHub, and essentially you just print your PCB, and you attach your components into it, and you have a miner. So you can essentially make your own miner. You can go and download the schematics. You can modify them. You can do whatever you want. There's an open source miner, and you can learn to make your own miner right now for under $50. So I think it's a great way to learn about the hardware that's powering Bitcoin mining. It's a great way to understand the process of mining, and it's also a nice hobby project to learn more about electronics, and again, about Bitcoin mining. So the Bitaxe open source hardware is powered by BM1397. So it's very interesting because this design is actually a chip from Bitmain. It's the chip that powers the 17 series, Antminer 17 series. And we can actually just take those chips. So if you have a miner at home that doesn't have any use anymore, well, first you can fix it. But second, if you don't want to fix it, you can also take out the chips from that board and build your own PCB boards if you wish. And you can do that with a project such as Bitaxe, which is using a very known chip and a very efficient chip as well. So it's actually a way to mine profitably too. It won't generate a lot of hashes. Obviously, you just have one ASIC chip. When these miners, they have north of 200 chips. But still, a very interesting way to get involved and understand. And so let's get to the data. So converting an Antminer S9 into home meter obviously costs a bit of money. So we have to print that. You have to buy the 3D printer if you don't have one, or buy a case if you don't have one. By the way, we can print you one. But then you also need to change the fans for more quiet fans. You also need to add the Wi-Fi dongle if you want to have a nice spot for it. So all in all, we can say, fortunately, right now, S9s are very, very cheap. Nobody wants them. So it's very interesting to buy it now because for under 500 Canadian dollars, you can actually make the whole box plus the miner. We can source that for you if you wish, the miners, the box, parts, whatever it is. So if you have your own S9 that you want to repurpose, just get a box, get the fans, and do it yourself. If you want the whole thing prepackaged, we can help with that as well. Um, yes, sir. Yes, so that is a good question, and let's go to next slide. Actually, so there it is. You have the data, and it is a pertinent question. So obviously, remember this is not financial advice. We're just showing you some assumptions. So you can take those assumptions, and it's just in order to make a purchase that you can think of. Obviously, nobody has a voodoo crystal ball, and nobody can predict what will happen. But I think it's fair to say we can expect about the same difficulty increase and about the same price increase. And based on that assumption, then we can look into the next mining epoch being 4 years, the next halving. And we can find out that if you were to mine from next halving to the next one, you would make about 3,000 Canadian dollars reusing electricity from your heaters at home and turning it into Bitcoin. The assumption for to get those results obviously is you don't sell your bitcoins during that whole time. So it's depending on what you do and everything, it can move around. If you ever want to make some projection, we have everything you need to make the projection. We can go over with you and use your own assumptions and generate the data. So we use your own assumptions, to not be biased and use our own bias into projecting in the future. Where it gets interesting, there's no case for that as of now, but as I've mentioned, we are sponsoring the next one from CryptoCloaks. The T17, for instance, will generate about $8,000 Canadian dollars. And you can see also on the right, we have the amount in Bitcoin. So in this case, it would be 0.03 Bitcoin that would be accumulated through the whole period. So in this case, it only leaves me with one question for you guys. Why would you not do it? So I guess if anybody has questions, I can go and go through that. It can be any mining related questions. So we deal with institutional players, we deal with retail players, we deal anything.
Are you adding this to a mining farm, or like not a mining farm, but like what's it? A pool? Sorry.
So I'm being asked if we are adding this to a mining farm or some kind of tool. So what the market we're aiming here, obviously, with this project is to fulfill, to give you guys a chance to get into the mining game and not only leave it into the hands of all the institutional players that are out there right now. So some of the institutional players are already really interested, and they're also being forced anyways into using some of that creativity. And we can see here in Quebec, there are some projects already where some of the heat is reused from mining farms. But the case with mining farms is most of the time you have, 10 or 20 or 30 megawatts. And so there's way too much heat to recover it all.
I guess I'll rephrase it. If you're running one of those at home, is there any chance that you'll win the lottery of? So do you have to join a mining pool?
Got it. Yeah, pertinent question. So I'm being asked, should you, essentially, I'll rephrase the question a bit. So should you join a pool maybe, or should you solo mine? And if you're solo mining, is there any chance for you to find a block? And the answer is actually, even with your CPU, there's a chance you find a block. It's really all based on stats and luck, and there's not a lot of luck for you to find it, but there is a chance you find it. So solo mining wouldn't be the way to go forward, but you can join a pool, absolutely. And joining a pool, you should get figures that look like this one.
Okay, so that was with a pool.
That would be pooled mining, because obviously solo mining could be 0 or it could be 6.25 bitcoins.
Yeah, okay.
So it's statistical assumption regarding difficulty.
Yeah.
And then difficulty increases over time with the average increase in difficulty since 2018. And then price is compared with evolution of price in 2018. So the increase in price in average since 2018 is 1.7% every 2 weeks, right? So that's what's projected into the future. for each mining cycle of 2 weeks, each difficulty cycle, sorry about that. And for the difficulty, as I said, it's just increasing as it's been increasing on average since 2008. We have stats until like 2013, though like the first years are so like all over the place that we prefer to keep like more, let's say, conservative assumptions of the last 4 years that were a little, let's say, slower in their pace.
But those assumptions are based on pools.
They're based on pool mining, yes. Any other question, Bitcoin mining related? Yes, sir.
The 17 series, those are on your 240 volts?
Yeah, good question. So the 17 series would normally run effectively on 240 volt. The fun thing, and we've run a lot of experiment about that, is it runs on 120 and 110 as well. There's a catch. There's a catch. You can't run it stuck. There's no way you can run it stuck on the 110 outlet because it's going to draw too many amps. So what you have to do is to nerf it down a bit, and this is what we're doing in this assumption here. You can see it's maybe you don't see there, but it's the frequency has been adjusted to be at 28.5 terahashes, where normally it would be 42 terahashes. All right, well, anything to add? Go ahead.
Yes, maybe the interesting point to add is that for most miners, when you like calm them down, let's say that when you downclock them, you tend to gain a bit of efficiency in terms of watts per terahashes that you get. So that T17 there that is modeled on the graph is actually at better efficiency than the stock 17. Those are the stats we had doing those tests. Yes.
I assume it will also last longer.
It is possible, as it doesn't eat as much, but that's a guess, especially with 17 series.
The question is the gentleman.
Vas-y, lève-toi.
Yes, sir.
I just talked about the price of the S9, but how much will that T17 cost?
Right now, it's about $500.
The T17. Add the case and the fans and everything. There's 2 more fans to take into account, so it's a bit more cost. Maybe $50 more to make the conversion.
Just for the machine.
Plus the machine. So maybe like to have the whole thing. It will depend on how much. It will depend obviously on how much filament it will use for the latest design. It will play into the cost as well because a lot of the cost is into making the box. But once we have the final estimation, I would say. At current economics, so obviously at current ASIC prices, it's probably going to be $200 or $300 more than an S9, so it's really worth.
And the jump.
Do you have to revise your electrical installation at home to run that?
The electricity?
Vas-y.
If you have to revise electricity?
Yeah, do you have to change some things?
We will tune them so that you may plug them in 110 volts regular North American sockets. Though those PSUs are not designed for 120, so it's not a recommended use, though we know it works.
For like months without interruptions, we have some of those miners, but
But
normally, like you're not supposed to use 220 PSUs in 110 outlets.
Does that everyone understand the question?
Yeah, probably.
What's the lifetime of a miner approximately? By today, it's used already.
Yeah.
How long will it last?
If you buy it from us, we'll warranty it for at least 3 months. Though for use stuff, it's always a bit of a gamble. For an S9, if it's in good shape, I believe you would have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years maybe, especially if you keep it clean. It could go if you keep it clean, no dust, no nothing. You make sure that the air intake is clean. I think it will last the whole cycle until let's say 2000. I think it was 2028 that we modeled.
Yes.
I think it will. For the 17 series, it's more of a hard guess as they are very they're unreliable machines. They tend to break a lot. They have battery conditions, and we've worked on at the repair center on a ton of 17 series. So the 17 series is harder to evaluate. To guess in the future. But S9, I expect very long reliability.
Ici. Il y avait déjà. Yeah.
If I understand properly the question, the gentleman is asking if renting or owning your home, which will change your electricity bills, or
Well, not really. Basically, like I don't own it. I'm renting it. So do I stop my landlord if he's gonna do something?
No, no, he's gonna raise the minor.
so that you don't have to do
Exactly.
electrical work. So if you're a renter, if you're an owner of a home, it shouldn't change anything.
But if you're a
Ensuite, on va
renter
mettre en-
and electricity is included, will the guy figure out?
It
Well,
is possible.
that actually is the use case where you're running a Antminer not as a heater. It will matter in this case, but actually the landlord might actually save money, because one of the use case we've done is that it actually decreased the consumption, the electricity consumption by 10% for heating the home. So there's actually maybe some economies to be made for that landlord if you were to use Antminer as a heater. I just want to go to the gentleman in the back.
The only thing holding me back right now from money at home is reassuring my girlfriend I'm not just at the house on what type of guarantee is there behind? Like, I know like the farming line running 24/7. You got people watching it on standby. But if I'm to leave the house for a long period of time, I got things working. Like, what's the risk here? And especially with like home insurance and things like that. Is
Yeah.
there any type of buffer or reassurance?
So home insurance obviously is a tricky one because they don't understand. So you're gonna speak to one agent, everything is fine. Speak to another one, same company, and it's apocalypse. So really, right now, there's no way really to tell about insurance because they don't understand nothing. But if I was to mine at home, definitely I would want a case like that because all the cases of fire I've seen with NASIC is actually just sparks, electric sparks, and it just creates some, how to say the Flemish. Spark, yeah, it just sparks. So yeah, yeah. And it's very rare also. Like we see this on volume, like we process thousands of machines, and I see this like maybe once every 1,000 machine.
And they tend to be like very badly maintained machines that are all dusty, and then the cables they will kind of like eat and they will break or like
Yeah, fuse.
they fuse together and then they short and they caught in fire like poof. But it's not something like it's something you see in a very badly maintained environment.
Yes, sir.
What's the cap you're talking about with Bitaxe?
Yeah.
What is that cap?
Yeah, so there's a moratorium that's been put in place in 2018. And so this moratorium says that for any players that were already, that had a blockchain permit, they can keep it and they can keep on rolling with that. So if you have, for instance, 1 megawatt, you can keep on running that 1 megawatt. But if you had plans for an expansion to 2 megawatt, for instance, well, you can do it. And there's no way to do it until they bring to the next block of distribution. But what happened lately in the last 12 months, we've spoke a lot, maybe you've heard in the news, the Fitzgibbon minister and all, Sophie Brochu and all that debacle, it's led to a lot of politicization again of mining. And so Régie de l'Énergie had already stated that we should be able to have another 330 megawatts distributed to the industry. But for now, they froze it even further. And it's possible it stay frozen like this until 2026 or 2027. Just to end on your point, and we'll get back, the cap right now is at 50 kilowatt. So anybody that wants to plug in for mining don't have to report mining if they are under 50 kilowatt. But as soon as you get to 50.1 kilowatt, normally you have to get a permit from Hydro-Québec. And if you don't get it, they'll apply what they call a dissuasive rate, where they charge you 15 cents per kilowatt hour, which is essentially double the normal rate at home. Did that answer? Yeah.
Just curious what the lower end cap was. Like, where is kilowatts? Yeah, that was my question.
Got it. Any more question? Yes, sir.
How much would you pay per month if you plug one S9 in your outlet?
Yeah. So the amount you will pay by month will depend obviously on your energy rate, electricity rate at home. So we can, if you want, we can sit down and have some run some numbers for that. Here, our demonstration doesn't take that into account because what we're accounting for is you're using 1 watt for 1 watt, right? So you would be eating, and that, by the way, this is what our model is doing right now. You can see those lines right there is essentially the months you're turning off your miner. We took that into account. So we are taking into account that in those next 4 years, you're actually going to turn your miner 5 months a year because it's summer. You don't want to heat in summer, right? So we're actually taking into account that you'll unplug your miner. We're just converting the actual heat you're generating already, that you're already paying for, into more Bitcoins for you. You can actually eat a pool, but I would go with immersion.
If I can answer the question straightforwardly, if you were to plug in S9 and have nothing, sorry. And if you were to plug in S9 and have nothing else on, and if you were not to plug that S9, you wouldn't pay any electricity, then it would cost you about 60 to 70 bucks a month to run the S9 for electricity. If you're using that electricity as heat, as he said, you already then, right, that price you already paid as heating your home, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You said you talked about underclocking your device. What does that mean, and how do you do it?
Okay, so Alex, which is with us, is asking a very good question. We talked about underclocking the machine. So what is it, and how we do it? So underclocking your machine is essentially lowering the frequency that's being asked from the chips on your machine. So you will reduce the amount of voltage and the amount of frequency, and this will in turn make the miner a bit more cold, but also it will make it consume less energy, and so it's going to make it compatible running at home because we lower a bit the current draw. Now, how to underclock your machine? There's many ways. First, you could go the hardware way, so you can just flash your EEPROM, and so the EEPROM is a part on your hash boards that you can flash, and it contains the data essentially of how your hash boards should be running inside the machine. And so you can flash it to have different settings than the stock settings. One more way, and this is, I think, the more popular way, is to use custom firmwares. So you'll see firmwares such as BrainsOS or Vnish, and there's actually also a version of Vnish that we have our own self here. You can see. So this is the Antminer right there. That's mining right there. You can see its data. It's been on for 35 minutes now, doing about 10 terahashes. You can see the frequency, which is about 475 right now, and everything is LTA. Everything is doing what it should be doing. So this firmware, for instance, is allowing for underclocking, and so you can go here and see, for instance, the health of your chips, and use a setting here. So for instance, in this case, we're going to 10 terahashes to have about 850 watts drawn. Yes, sir.
Not exactly a mining question, but I know in the States you cannot produce your own electricity. You produce it and then you sell it back to the grid, and then you buy from the grid. Is it the same in Quebec?
So yes, it's the same in Quebec. So the question that's being asked is, for instance, you would have a solar roof or even a windmill, and you're generating some electricity. In Quebec, as in many states, you are obligated to sell any excess energy you have to the grid to a certain price. And most of the time, that price is going to be lower than what you can generate by mining. So I would argue that mining is a much better way to use your excess energy than reselling to the grid.
So it's a way to mine with more than 50 kilowatts.
It's well,
you're able to produce more than 50.
On a technical way, and we'll see how maybe the law side of things figure that out, with precedents. But for now, I would say if you want to stay on the safe lane, you want to stay under 50 kilowatts at the same address. Yes, sir.
If the S9 breaks after 1 year, what do? I send it back to you? How much does it cost? How long do I have to wait before I get it back?
Good question. So, for instance, you buy an Antminer S9, you buy it Space Heater Edition, the warranty runs out and your miner breaks. What do you do? So we're a repair center. So obviously, I'll preach for my church, and you can come to us. We can fix your machine. We have good rates. I think we have actually very fair rates and some of the best in North America. We're all priced in Canadian dollars, which makes us much cheaper than the competition. So I would say just bring it back to us and fix it if the economics make sense based on your own assumptions of what the future is going to be.
Do you have an idea of the cost for reparation?
Yeah, well, it depends also on the market. So obviously, demand for repairs is going to fluctuate a lot with the market. So when the market is crazy, we have too much job. We have to eliminate essentially. But when the market is slower, like it's been lately, we have like very fair prices. For instance, S9, L3 Plus, and these are exceptional, so don't expect the prices will always be this case. But about $35, $40 a hash board for those like old gens. Yes, sir.
I know nothing about the whole firmware situation. Can you start and stop it from there, from online, without being there, do that, or?
So there's a way for me to do a lot of things. I can reboot it, stuff like that. I can put it on pause, but it won't be a full turning off. So see, I have some options here. Stop CJ Miner, which is the software, open source software, by the way, that's being developed like 2011 or 2012, I think. Essentially, yeah, I can stop this. This is the actual mining software that's running on the control board of the machine, and this control board is giving the instructions to the hash boards, which themselves contain the ASIC chips. So we can just shut down the the software on the control board, which will stop giving load to the hash boards, and so essentially the machine is turned off, but the fans will still turn just as a safety. Yes, sir.
Is there an application to track your stuff from your phone, or do you absolutely need to be in a computer to access?
Well, it depends. Again, it's all about creativity. So if you have, I would go the safe route. So I would have a VPN at home and use that VPN to connect to my local network, and then just use your cell phone, connect to your VPN, connect to the IP address of the machine, or it has API too. So you can make your own dashboard today with tools like ChatGPT. You can generate that in a night, right?
One addition to the question as I mentioned before, if you're worried that you want to turn off your miners from a distance, let's say, as long as the energy pool is low, as it is right now because it's underclocked, you could still use a smart plug that you could turn off from your phone, and then the machine would shut down. It's not something I would advise though for like an S19 on 240 that is pulling a lot of power. But if the power consumption is decent, maybe you can go through a smart plug and do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Alex.
I understood that when you're firing off your machine, I was told that wasn't a great idea to fire it off when it's in wintertime. So basically, the colder your machine is,
Yes.
chances are when you're going to reboot it,
Yes.
you get air, you have no errors.
All right, so Alex is also a part of our team, and the question he's asking here is essentially what's happening with especially 17 series is when you shut down your miner, but it's more of a mining facility issue with, for instance, the curtailment and stuff like that. We have to shut down, and especially during the winter, there can be a temperature, shock on the machines. So, for instance, what we do at Decentral is we recycle our heat. So we'll take the heat from the hot aisles and we'll shoot it in the cold aisles before shutting down the machines. But for those that don't have that kind of setup, in an industrial setup, really at home, it won't be an issue. Well, you're going to have some problems because the solderings on your dashboard will start to have some micro fractures, and there's no other way than a hardware fix for to bring back your hash rate. I think there was another question. That's it? Yes, sir.
If you have one chip that stops working, will the whole thing stop working, or will?
So it depends on the design. Most of the design, they will favor efficiency of your machine, right? Because you want to have the best energy efficiency to be able to compete. Because right now, it's all those mining farms competing about. There's two variables really for being profitable. There's your electricity rate and there's the efficiency of your machine. And so they'll look mostly for energy efficiency, and the best way to achieve that is through parallelization. And so essentially you need, like Christmas lights, you need to put them all after the other. And so if one chip breaks, the whole chain breaks.
Can you fix that with firmware?
You're
just like at home and you don't want to spend money to repair your board.
So the real answer will be it depends, but most of the firmwares won't allow that, and also most of the hardware problems won't allow that. Because if signal can make it through the chip, but the chip doesn't work, that's one thing, and that's fine. And firmware developers could maybe, it's known there's a way to do it, but a bit lazy to do it because most of the cases where your chip fails, the signal won't go through, and there's no purpose in doing that because it's physically broken. There's no connection. The chain is, is broken.
The gentleman there, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
So your company, if you have an idea for like doing some area, can we come to you and talk about that?
Absolutely.
That's what you guys do.
That's what we do.
Anytime. First time.
Working days.
Legit, we have a very nice team. People at Decentral, they're working very hard. They're working very late. They're working, even in the weekends. We have guys that went to Iceland just 2 weeks ago. They're going back next week. We're doing a lot of externalization. We're, touching everything. We work with institutions. We work with retails. You have one machine. You have 10,000. We want to work with you. Yes, sir. In Laval on the 440 highway. It's essentially in a building with a gym, Extreme Evolution. If you look for it, go to our website, just tap on the address and it will take you to the Google Maps. One last question. Yes. I'm being metered. Yes. I wish, but it's actually a product that KryptykHex designed, and we're merely just printing, the case and bringing it all together and trying to educate more and more people about it. But this case really, the merits is to KryptykHex. The next case, the T17 and S17 version, we're sponsoring it, but it's still going to be a design from the very talented, I can't remember his name right now, but the very talented guy behind KryptykHex.
Just a short one. How much BTUs?
BTUs. Ah, man, I don't have the figure right now, to be honest. But we come see us at the table, and we'll get that for you.
It's doing at 900 watts.
There you go.
Right now, it pulls 900 watts. So whatever the equivalent in BTU is, it uses just under 1 kilowatt right now with actual settings.
Hey, awesome. Can you guys give a big round of applause to
Tout est mieux.
Yeah. So